The world was changing faster than anyone could understand. Empires that once stretched across continents were beginning to fade. Cities rebuilt themselves after war. New machines, new voices, and new ideas were reshaping everyday life. And yet, through all those decades of change, one quiet figure remained constant. She met presidents, prime ministers, and kings. She watched nations rise, alliances shift, and history unfold from a distance few people ever experienced. For more than 70 years, that figure was Queen Elizabeth II. When she was born in 1926, the British Empire still covered a vast part of the globe. Few could have imagined that the young girl growing up in London would one day become the longest reigning monarch in British history. At first, her life seemed ordinary by royal standards. She was not expected to wear the crown. The future of the British monarchy appeared to lie elsewhere. But history rarely follows the path people expect. A single decision inside the British royal family would quietly change the course of her life. The child who once lived in the background would suddenly become the center of British history. And from that moment forward, Queen Elizabeth II would begin a journey that would shape the story of the British monarchy for generations. Elizabeth Alexandra Mary Windsor was born in London on April 21st, 1926, into a family that stood close to the center of the British monarchy, but not directly in line for the throne. Her father was Prince Albert, Duke of York, the second son of King George V. At the time, the future of the crown was expected to pass through another branch of the British royal family. For that reason, the young Elizabeth grew up without the immediate pressure of becoming queen. Life inside the royal household was structured, but in many ways quiet. Much of her education took place at home under private tutors. History, languages, and constitutional law formed the foundation of her lessons, preparing her to understand the traditions of the British monarchy, even though no one believed she would one day lead it. Her closest companion during childhood was her younger sister, Princess Margaret. The two girls spent much of their early years together within the protected world of royal residences. Those who knew Elizabeth as a child often described her as calm, thoughtful, and unusually responsible. Even at a young age, she showed a strong sense of discipline that quietly set her apart. Everything changed in 1936. That year, a constitutional crisis shook the British monarchy. King Edward VIII, Elizabeth's uncle, made the shocking decision to abdicate the throne in order to marry Wallis Simpson, an American divorcee. The decision stunned Britain and the wider world. For the first time in modern British history, a reigning monarch stepped down voluntarily. The consequences were immediate and profound. Elizabeth's father, who had never expected to become king, suddenly ascended the throne as King George VI. The quiet family life that Elizabeth had known disappeared overnight. At only 10 years old, she became the heir presumptive to the British monarchy. From that moment forward, her future was no longer uncertain. The young princess began receiving more formal preparation for royal responsibility. Her father's reign unfolded during one of the most challenging periods in British history, and Elizabeth watched closely as King George VI carried the burden of leadership through times of national difficulty. Although she was still a child, the transformation in her life was unmistakable. The routines of royal duty, public appearances, and constitutional awareness slowly replaced the ordinary rhythms of childhood. In many ways, the moment that reshaped her destiny came not through ambition, but through circumstance. Elizabeth had not sought the crown, yet history had quietly placed it in her path. And as the world moved toward the storm of the Second World War, the young princess, who never expected to rule, was already preparing for a future at the heart of the British monarchy. As Europe moved toward war in the late 1930s, the life of the young princess began to change once again. Britain was entering one of the darkest chapters in its history. By 1939, the Second World War had begun, and the country faced a threat unlike anything it had experienced in generations. During the Blitz, German air raids struck London and other major cities with devastating force. Many royal advisors believed the two young princesses should leave Britain for safety. However, their mother firmly rejected the idea, insisting that the children would remain with the king and the nation during its most difficult hours. The experience left a deep impression on the future Queen Elizabeth II. Even as a teenager, She understood that the British monarchy could not simply stand apart from the people during times of crisis. In 1945, at the age of 19, she made a decision that surprised many within the royal household. Rather than remaining inside the safety of royal life, she chose to serve directly in the war effort. Elizabeth joined the Auxiliary Territorial Service, the women's branch of the British Army. There, she trained as both a driver and a mechanic. She learned how to dismantle engines, repair damaged vehicles, and operate military transport trucks. It was demanding physical work, far removed from the ceremonial duties normally associated with the British royal family. This experience made her the only monarch in British history known to have served in the armed forces. The discipline and sense of duty she developed during that period would remain central to the character of Queen Elizabeth II throughout her life. But the war years also brought another important change. During this time, Elizabeth's relationship with a young naval officer began to grow stronger. His name was Prince Philip. They had first met several years earlier, when Elizabeth was only 13. From that moment, those close to her later recalled that she seemed certain about her feelings. Over the following years, the two exchanged letters while Philip continued his service in the Royal Navy during the war. Their relationship was not without controversy. Some members of the British royal family were unsure about the match. Prince Philip was born into a European royal family that had lost much of its wealth and influence, and his background raised concerns among certain royal advisors. Yet Elizabeth remained firm in her decision. After the war ended, the couple announced their engagement, and in 1947 they were married at Westminster Abbey. For a nation still recovering from years of conflict and rationing, the wedding became a powerful symbol of renewal and hope. Millions followed the ceremony, and for many people across Britain, it represented the beginning of a brighter future. However, only a few years later, Elizabeth's life would take another unexpected turn. In 1952, while she and Prince Philip were traveling in Kenya during an official tour of the Commonwealth, devastating news arrived from London. King George VI had died suddenly. At just 25 years old, Elizabeth became Queen Elizabeth II, and the young woman who once expected a quiet royal life suddenly found herself standing at the head of the British monarchy. The coronation of Queen Elizabeth II in 1953 marked the beginning of a new chapter, not only for the British monarchy, but also for modern media. For the first time in history, a British coronation was broadcast on television. Millions of people across Britain and around the world watched the ceremony unfold from Westminster Abbey. For many families, it was the first time the monarchy entered their living rooms. The moment symbolized a bridge between ancient royal tradition and a rapidly modernizing world. Queen Elizabeth II was only 27 years old, yet she now carried the responsibility of leading the British monarchy through an era of dramatic global change. Throughout her reign, the Queen worked alongside 15 British prime ministers. The relationship between the monarch and the government remained one of the most fascinating aspects of the British constitutional system. Every week, the Prime Minister would travel to Buckingham Palace for a private audience with the Queen. No cameras were present. No official records were kept. These conversations, held in strict confidentiality, became one of the quiet traditions of British political life. Her first Prime Minister was Winston Churchill, the wartime leader whose reputation had already become legendary. Over the decades that followed, Queen Elizabeth II would meet many other leaders who shaped modern Britain. Among them were Margaret Thatcher, the first female Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Tony Blair, who guided Britain through the turn of the millennium, and later leaders such as Boris Johnson and Liz Truss. Despite her symbolic authority within the British monarchy, Queen Elizabeth II remained firmly committed to political neutrality. Her role was not to govern, but to provide continuity and stability above political debate. However, even a monarchy built on centuries of tradition could not avoid moments of crisis. One of the most difficult periods for the British royal family arrived in 1997 with the sudden death of Princess Diana. The tragedy shocked Britain and the entire world. Public grief poured into the streets as millions mourned the loss of a woman many people saw as a symbol of compassion and modern change within the monarchy. At first, the royal family remained at Balmoral Castle, where the Queen stayed with her grandsons during the early days following the accident. The decision was intended to protect the young princes during an intensely painful moment. Yet public criticism soon began to grow. Many people believed the monarchy had remained too silent while the nation grieved. Recognizing the depth of public emotion, Queen Elizabeth II made a rare televised address. Speaking directly to the people, she described her feelings not only as a monarch, but also as a grandmother. The speech helped calm the growing tension and marked an important turning point. From that moment forward, the British monarchy began adapting more openly to the expectations of a modern media age. Through both triumph and crisis, Queen Elizabeth II continued to carry the responsibilities of the crown with the same quiet sense of duty that had defined her life from the beginning. By the beginning of the 21st century, Queen Elizabeth II had become far more than a national figure. She had grown into one of the most recognizable leaders in modern British history. Her reign eventually lasted 70 years, making her the longest reigning monarch the British monarchy had ever known. Few figures in British history had witnessed so many dramatic changes while remaining at the center of national life. During those decades, the world itself transformed. When Queen Elizabeth II first came to the throne in 1952, Britain was still adjusting to the fading power of the British Empire. Many nations that had once been governed from London were moving toward independence. Out of this transition, a new international relationship gradually emerged through the Commonwealth. The Queen became an important symbolic figure within that network of countries. Through countless diplomatic visits and state ceremonies, she represented continuity between Britain's past and its evolving role in the modern world. Over the course of her reign, she met 14 presidents of the United States, along with hundreds of presidents, kings, queens, and political leaders from across the globe. Each meeting carried quiet significance. Though her role remained constitutional rather than political, the presence of Queen Elizabeth II often helped reinforce the idea of stability within international diplomacy. For many people outside Britain, she became the living face of the British monarchy, but her influence was not limited to world leaders. Millions of ordinary citizens encountered her during royal tours, public ceremonies, and community events across cities, villages, and Commonwealth nations. People often described the same impression. She listened more than she spoke. Her manner was careful, measured, and consistent. While governments changed and political debates intensified, Queen Elizabeth II maintained a steady presence above those conflicts. In many ways, her role was symbolic of something deeper in British culture. The British monarchy had survived wars, revolutions, and enormous social change. Through all of it, Queen Elizabeth II represented a sense of historical continuity. She had lived through the final years of the empire, the rebuilding of post-war Britain, and the arrival of the digital age. Few leaders had watched the world evolve across such a wide span of time. And through every transformation, the quiet figure of Queen Elizabeth II remained a familiar presence in British life. In April 2021, Queen Elizabeth II experienced one of the most personal and painful moments of her life. Her husband, Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh, passed away at the age of 99 after more than 7 decades of marriage. For most of her reign, Prince Philip had been her closest partner and constant support. Together, they had faced the pressures of the British monarchy, raised a family within the public eye, and represented the British royal family across the world. At his funeral, held under strict pandemic restrictions, one image captured global attention. The Queen sat alone, dressed in black, quietly observing the ceremony. She followed the same public health rules that applied to millions of ordinary citizens across Britain. The photograph quickly became one of the most powerful and symbolic images of her entire reign. It showed not only the monarch, but also the woman who had shared a lifetime with Prince Philip. In the months that followed, Queen Elizabeth II appeared less frequently in public. Age was beginning to slow her down. Yet she continued carrying out many of her official duties whenever possible. Even near the very end of her life, her sense of responsibility remained clear. On September 6, 2022, at Balmoral Castle in Scotland, she welcomed Britain's newest Prime Minister, Liz Truss. The meeting followed a tradition that had lasted throughout her 70 years on the throne. Prime ministers came and went, but the monarch remained a constant presence within the British monarchy. 2 days later, on September 8, 2022. Queen Elizabeth II passed away peacefully at the age of 96. Her life had stretched across nearly a century of British history. She had witnessed the final years of empire, the rebuilding of post-war Britain, the rise of modern democracy, and the transformation of the world through technology. Throughout those decades, Queen Elizabeth II remained a central figure within the British monarchy and a symbol of continuity in a rapidly changing world. For many people, she was more than a sovereign. She was a steady presence that linked generations together. And even after her passing, the legacy of Queen Elizabeth II continues to shape the story of the British royal family and the long history of the British monarchy. If this story of Queen Elizabeth II brought back memories of a moment in British history that stayed with you, share your thoughts below. Many people across generations experience different chapters of her reign, and every memory helps keep that history alive.